Hello friends and welcome back to Enterprise Architecture. Now, last episode we successfully completed our upgrade of our iron factory. So we are producing about twice as much iron as we were previous to that episode, and also our factory that's producing all of our primary iron ingredients, our iron plates, rods, screws, wires, and iron sheet. All of those things are increased double, basically. So with all these extra ingredients, the goal is to pipe these to a brand new factory that we're going to build that's going to handle our secondary ingredient construction. Things like our reinforced plates and whatnot, all of those sorts of things that require two inputs. We're going to build a whole factory just for those things. So let's get started. Now, once again, we are here in the grasslands, and most of our production is happening south of where you see me right now. So around this area where you see these two crates, this is the stretch where we have been doing our smelting. Just north of that is where we have been doing our primary item production, and we have everything from copper to zinc to stone, sand, caterium, all of that is happening in here. So the next space we're going to move into is this next little northern section, these hills. The foothills that are just underneath where all of that lovely, lovely coal resides. So there's not a whole lot of ingredients in this area, so we're going to take advantage of that by building a very large factory, probably up into the sky. And this, of course, is the area that we are talking about here, these hilly forested grassland section right here. We're going to start by building a platform into the sky here to put everything on top of and give us a little bit of room for these few nodes that do exist here. For instance, these stereotype nodes that we're going to want to use for iron. So we'll have plenty of clearance above all of that. Now, since none of our ingredients are liquid, that's going to be relatively easy to move things up and down. Now, we do need to bring it all the way from our factories here for that production to be able to take place. So we are going to have to run a series of lines down this way and back up. So we're going to start by building off of this corner. From here, we're going to want to build up into the sky just a little bit. So not too high, but enough that we're going to go over the top of most of these trees here. So we're going to kind of eyeball it right here, just like this. I think we're going to need maybe a little taller, maybe that. Let's try that as a starting point. And a really good way to test that that is indeed where we want it to be is by running out our area with Smart Mod, and we'll very quickly be able to see any spots where trees are poking over the top. Now you can see there are going to be a couple, and that's fine. We'll go through and we will trim those out with our chainsaw as time allows. Perfect. Now, careful observers are going to note that I do have cheats turned on. I am both flying and I am no longer dealing with building costs. It's basically creative mode, and that's because building something at this scale is going to take a whole lot of time going back and forth. So we're cheating a little bit here. I'm not going to use anything that I haven't actually unlocked, but I do not want to have to keep running back and forth to that base all the way over there and back here and back there over and over again. As I am trying to do this construction, it's just going to take forever to do it that way. Now, onto this platform, we're going to want a central area that we're going to bring in our ingredients and start pumping them around the various areas. So I think, given that right straight ahead here should be our iron factory there. So iron ingredients need to come all the way back over here, basically where this stereotype ores are right there. So to that end, I think we're going to bring it straight back and then up, kind of between our factory areas there. Now, the easiest way to do that is to bring it kind of through these woods here, kind of a straight shot all the way above our lake where we're pumping water right there. So I think we're going to run this straight out. So let's grab that. And I think we do want to have a little bit of room below. So let's just go down, let's say 2 foundations. And then run this out from there. Something like that. And on top of this foundation then, we're gonna build a bus. Okay, so here's our to-do list for our secondary production factory. We know that we need a bunch of reinforced iron plates for a variety of ingredients and tools later down the production chain. We're definitely gonna need rotors. We're definitely gonna need stators. Now, brass pipes are going to be pretty easy. We actually have brass ingots already being produced. Simple conveyor belts are going to be a tertiary product once we have reinforced iron plates. Regular conveyor belts present a bit of a problem because we do not yet have bronze production set up anywhere in an automated fashion. So we'll have to work back on that. I might do that in between episodes. Encased industrial beams are straightforward. All we need is steel beams and concrete per normal. Motors, again, another tertiary product once we have rotors and stators set up. Smart plating relies on bronze frames, which again requires bronze. So again, that's not going to be available yet. And then moving into the last row here, modular frames, again, tertiary once we have reinforced iron plates. Lead frames we can do actually from the start because that's just lead ingots and screws. And then of course, bronze frames, we still have to do the bronze production for that to be put online. So these 12 products are the ones that we've currently unlocked. Now, there's certainly going to be more that are going to be added to this list. And of course, this doesn't take into account things that are just one-off items that we don't really use for much stuff. So for instance, simple solar panels or our rotors that are used for hydroelectric. So since we have so many overlapping ingredients in our various production facilities, we're going to want to manage those inputs. And the best way to do that, I think, might be to use Wiremod. So we're going to go ahead and unlock this. This is a great little mod that allows you to dynamically program aspects of your builds. You should check out my video on this if you have not already. So in a nutshell, here's a setup based on what I did in that Wiremod video. We have here a series of splitters, smart splitters in this case, and a series of mergers, and that ends up giving us two different lines. Now, let's say that we wanted to take a bunch of reinforced plates that we've manufactured, and we want to send them to two different inputs. Say one's going to make modular frames, and one's going to make conveyor belts. We're probably going to want to control how much goes to each location. Typically, you just do that by using standard splitters. This gives us a lot more control. So I've put a Wiremod slider here, and that goes from 0 to 1 to 2. Now, if I set it to 0, you'll see both of these lights turn off. These are attached to these conveyor limiters. All these do is say whether or not items can flow through them. So by having my smart splitters here, I've got all of my overflow going through straight and any items going to the right. So when these limiters are turned off, no items will flow past them, and thus all of the items become overflow straight through. If I have these both turned on, all items will move from left to right, and thus there will be no overflow, and these will go straight through. Now, an important note here is that these are Mark III belts, and these are Mark II belts going into these. So since a Mark III belt is basically a little bit more than double a Mark II belt, this gives us two filters. So 120 items here, 120 items there, merged back to become 240. Now, again, technically it's a 270 belt, but I don't tend to put more than 240 items on a single Mark III belt. So if I go down to my little slider here, I can set this to somewhat above 1. And when I do that, the green light on the first one of these turns on, meaning 120 items will then be moving, and that'll leave 120 going down the original side. If I then move that all the way over to 2, the second light turns on, and that now means all of my items are moving from the left belt to the right belt instead. So this is how we can very simply control for the number of items going to a given facility. So we use that to ration our various parts. We can get even more fine-grained if we want. We could use 60 belts here. We could use tier 1 instead and do 4 of them. And that means that we would have 4 different notches that we could set it to, 4 different units of measure. So this is the simplest layout for this. Obviously, we would continue to split these out depending on the number of different places that we'd want to send it. And of course, we could use something more complicated than just a switch here to determine where those outputs are going. This is a very, very basic logic setup. Now again, if you want to know the details of how to set up all of these gates and the lights and all of the limiters, please do go watch the Wiremod video. That's going to tell you how all of this stuff glues together. But for our purposes, this just kind of magically works. Okay, so let's take a look at those logistics actually laid out and in action. So I've put here a small reinforced iron plate factory. Not much to look at just quite yet. Now on the front, I have this slider. I'll probably move this to a different location at some point in the near future, but it works on the same idea as the previous one. So that takes the value of the slider. If the value is 0, these lights will both be red, and neither of these limiters will let any items through. If it's 1, only the first one will let items through. And if it's 2, both will let items through. And again, these are Mark III belts coming out, but these are Mark II belts coming in, so that's going to limit it to 120 or 240 total throughput. Now, you could do separate limiters on either side, but it's really per building that I want to be thinking. So that slider is affecting the whole of both inputs. Now, this is a little different than the previous version because we do have these smart splitters with our overflow in any, but that means that only our overflow is going to be coming out of the back of this, and that'll continue to run down this bus that we're going to build out underneath here. Now you notice the bus kind of makes this hairpin turn and comes back around, and that's just so we can start on the far end here. But the side effect of that is if we have more than 2 buildings needing a given part, we're going to have to rethink these logistics and split these up a little bit more fine-grained, maybe using 60 belts instead of 120 belts here. But you can see, given the footprint that it takes up, which is exactly 3 foundations for this layout, you could easily expand this to add another 2 and only take up 5 foundations, whereas my overall factory takes up 7 because we are doing assemblers. Now inside, we're using a very basic standard pattern that you all know and love already, with one little twist. We are using smart splitters instead of regular splitters. And the reason that we do that is because we want to use that same overflow mechanic. So what this means is, by using the smart splitters, these first 2 assemblers are going to completely fill up their inventory before it's going to go to the next set of assemblers. That means that if we only have 120 items coming in, it's only going to go to these first 4 ever, because these first 4 will fill up their inventory and then they'll start using them at exactly the same rate, at least with regard to iron wire. Now iron plates, we are going to have some overflow. That's fine, we don't need to worry about that, but it'll then back up through this whole system because it is overflow based, back up through here and then back up into the main bus again. So at no point will that overflow actually back up at this point in the system once everything is filled up. Now that does mean it's a little slower to start. At first it's only going to be giving us 2 sets of these running, meaning only 10 per minute. But then once those fill up after, about a minute or 2, it's going to then fill up the next 2 and continue down the route if it is at full production speed. Now, typically I use Smart Mod for building, as I know a lot of people do, but there is a side effect here that when you're using Smart Mod with, I think, smart splitters only, it doesn't necessarily connect them properly. For whatever reason, it seems to put belts in place that are not actually connected and just look like they're connected. So we have to do all of this manually, which takes a while and is not the funnest part. But we're going to lay out all of our logistics here, set all of our configuration, and lay these out, and we'll be back in a second. And now last with the output, here are the finishing touches. We've added 3 conveyor limiters, not because we want to limit the output, but because we want to measure the output. I haven't been able to get the efficiency checker unlocked yet. I don't know where that went in this mod, but these will do for now, I guess. Although they are a little buggy. I'm trying to keep a count here of our throughput, and it's saying that one on the right is doing 60 per minute. I don't think that is actually correct. At most, if all of these are running, 5 times 8 means we're only getting 40 per minute. So I'm not sure why that's buggy the way that it is, but again, close enough for now. We'll just deal with that and figure out a solution later. If anybody knows why that's coming out with the wrong number, please hop into the comments and let me know. Now, as the first step towards a real design here, I've taken the bus lines here, put them on top of, instead of just concrete, grip foundations, and I've set into those our frame foundations. So these are actually inside of those grip foundations, which I think gives it a nice little look. Now, an alternative way of doing this that I had been considering instead of using the big foundations here, I'm not really sure which I like better, is to instead go to our structural solutions frames where they have shorter ones. And I think these could look better depending. So let me run this out and you can kind of get an idea for the feel. So if you do it this way, they look much slimmer and kind of airy in the way that it floats. And then the other alternative for this is to take these frames and instead put them directly underneath the 2-meter frame, like so. And again, it still gives you that airier look. I kind of like this a little better. I think this might be my favorite of them. Let me just put one more here so you can kind of get all three next to each other for a real feel of this. So yeah, there's this option here where it kind of sets inside of it. There's this one where it's underneath and it's bracing and supporting, and then this one which is kind of actually attached. Now there's no reason I couldn't combine these as well and do pillars to say with these longer ones and then use these shorter ones as support. But I think of these three, this might be the winner right here, just because it looks like it's kind of being lifted up. But again, let me know what you all think. Drop into the comments and tell me which of these you think looks best. For now, I'm going to leave the big ones. I might come back and redo that before the episode is complete. And there you can kind of see how that looks as our bus wraps around here. We're going to continue to add more lanes as new products are added to it. Now, I do know that right now, no more iron plates are used in this construction scheme, but we do have another use of wires for brass pipes, if I remember correctly. So that will need to go somewhere. So I think we might use a slightly different pattern here moving ahead. Since we're trying to do one item per building instead of multiple items per building, I think we're going to start going up with these. So since we have these logistics flows here, as we get new additional items on top of these belts that increase the throughput, so if we had another 240, technically 270, but 240 line on top of this, we can bring that up to its own logistics level for the next floor up, and then we can continue to grow these. I'm keeping these at a standard 4 walls high, so basically 4 times 4, 16 meters for this whole floor, and we're doing that because I know that the, what is the 3 input? The manufacturers, is that what the 3 input things are? Have we unlocked those yet? I don't know if we've even unlocked those yet. Anyways, I think it's the manufacturers are next, and those have 4 inputs, and those are 4 walls high, even though these are only 3 walls high for the assemblers. So we're just going to give ourselves lots and lots of space here. And all of our logistics are tucked away in this little 3 foundation wide space up front. So I think we're going to close this in potentially, since we are at the maximum amount that we can do with the belts that are running into this plant. We can't do more than this. So I think that's a nice, tidy way of dealing with that. So let's take another look here at the finished bus. So I've added the ingredients that we need for rotors and stators, as well as our bronze ingots that we're going to need for conveyor belts. So I'm bringing all of that from way back over here, in this case the bronze ingots from the bronze factory, the smeltery, and the other ingredients are here locally in this middle area where we're making them. So all of our first tier single ingredient items. It's a bit of a spaghetti mess here from a logistics standpoint, but it's not so much that I hate it. Now above here, this is where the main bus line runs. I'd actually been driving the other night and saw a really cool bridge near a warehouse and factory space where it kind of had this divided sort of look to it. So I wanted to copy something like that. I'm using standard frames here as well as the Structural Solutions grates over top of just some steel pillars. And I think that gives us a good finished look here overall. It kind of matches what we were doing on the other side with these frames and the actual platforms going into them. And I just think it looks kind of neat. It still needs some supports and structures and struts and whatnot, but as a basic piece of this design, I like where this is going and we'll probably keep working with this. Okay, so with our basic build mostly done here, it's about time to start decorating this. Now, I have a couple of ideas that I want to use here, similar to my last build for my iron factory. First things first, I want to pull out these foundations a little bit to give me a little bit more room to maneuver. Ideally, I'm going to make this a slightly bigger and longer building than the actual space underneath here so that I can dip back in with it a little bit and have some room to maneuver. Now, I think instead of regular foundations, I actually want to go back to Structural Solutions concrete again. Since these are paintable, I think they're going to look a little bit better than if I just went ahead and used the standard foundations. And I think what I want to do is use some hex windows. I think we'll do those right here. So they're offset a bit. And I might end up bringing these forward a little bit more. I think that a full foundation back is actually too far for us. Yeah, let's go ahead and grab micromanage and bring all of these forward a little bit, just so it sits a little bit better on this edge. We're going to change our increment to huge and then just bring those forward by half a foundation like so. Put some small billboards behind it. I think that'll give us a nice little look here. That close enough? That's pretty close. But again, we do have Smart Mod installed, so we may as well bring that right up into that window. I'm doing this because I want to put some sort of a color behind these frames the same way that I did my iron factory. And the easiest way to do that is to just use billboards behind the hex frames. And you still have that hex texture, but with the benefit of having them be any color that you want. Okay, so there we have our wall of signs behind hex frame. I do know that I want the top half of this to flip out a little bit. I mean, tilt these at an angle so that it kind of gives us that diagonal effect. So let's come over here and we grab our huge micromanage again, and there we go. We're just gonna shift that a little to the left. That looks about right. I think I can live with that. That'll do. Okay, so that's a good start. But now I want more diagonals on this, and I think these double ramps might be the way to get what I want from this. So let's change our mode to vertical. Let's put our double ramps in here like this. And again, maybe I want these further back to be lined up a little bit more. Maybe. Let's take a look. Okay, there we go. I finally started getting a look I wanted once I tweaked this a little bit. I pushed these back by a half foundation, and that way the bottom of them kind of line up perfectly with the bottom of these diagonal windows I've got here. And again, the rounded chamfers on top I think gives it a nice little distinct visual edge. In fact, I like it so much, maybe I'll go ahead and put those down at the bottom here. And that'll make it look almost as if this is the bottom of a windowsill in some ways. I think that could look kind of cool. So there's two ways we can go about this. We can either go out by another foundation and wrap the sides of this building in an entire solid foundation. That's sort of a Flexo style method here. But I think for my purposes, I'm okay with not doing that. We're already taking up a lot of room here, and I want to leave a lot of space between these. So instead, I think what I'm going to do is pull these walls off in favor of using concrete walls. I think that's the way to do it. And I mean the Structural Solutions concrete walls specifically. So let's pull those down and replace them with concrete and see how that looks. Okay, there, I've adjusted this out a little bit here so it fits a little bit more flush. And as a result, I use these concrete wall ramps here so the top pillars match up, as well as these teeny tiny concrete 4x4 walls to kind of fill in the gaps. I do not have a chamfer top matching piece, and that's just gonna have to be okay. Hopefully no one's gonna be staring too closely at that except for you all who I just told about it. Now, to go with this orange, I think to do a lighter blue window here. Okay, so I think that looks just about right. That blue and that orange, I think, goes together really, really nicely. Now, we do need to keep decorating this a little bit more, just because this doesn't really quite have enough visual appeal for me. I think I want to add maybe some of these frames. Let's just bring this out a little bit here. Let's see if I can't get these to line up the way that I want. No, doesn't let me do anything on a partial? That's fine. Okay, so there you can go and get a sense of the two different options here. I started tweaking the one on the right a little bit more, adding more structure and more elements, and I think we're kind of getting into the ballpark of where I really want to be with it. Okay, so I've played with this a little bit more, and I'm starting to get something I like. I think this side works a little bit better than that side. That's just a little too imposing the way it's set up. But I do want to make a couple of quick little tweaks here to this one. Maybe we rotate the top and the middle one. And then we get that. There. That's kind of interesting. I think I like that. So let's go ahead and reproduce that real quick. So the quickest way to do this is to go ahead and use micromanage to copy and paste. So let's go ahead and select these very carefully. Make sure we're getting just the frames and not the wall behind. But we do want to get the wall behind for our anchor point, which means this, like so. It turns a little bit greener, you can see. That means it's anchored. And then that will become our target anchor. And let's copy and paste. And hopefully the game won't crash. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, I've capped this off with our standard fix-it roofs in a 1 meter size, and I'm just using the default color here that we've been using throughout this playthrough, that deep, deep blue. I think that provides a nice contrast to the other pieces here. So I feel like this could use with just a little more decoration. So I started experimenting with adding some columns on here using just our outer corner extensions. These are the 4 meters broken up by 1 meters, colored are fix-it blue and with black on the concrete ones here in between, kind of break it up a little bit. And I think that that works kind of well. I think maybe we'll do a couple more rows of those. Now, it's not especially hard to put these in place. All you have to do is select your starting point. We actually want to come up 1 from where that is, like so, and just rotate those. And then you just go back and forth using your outer corner extension in 1 meter, and then intermixing those with the ones that are 4 meter over and over all the way up. There, now because these are 6 high, it's exactly room for 5 of these outer corner extensions in the 4 meter and 4 in between in the 1 meter, and that actually just works out just perfectly. So then we just go through, paint these blue, like so, and then we paint the other ones black. And again, as I've complained many times, the concrete that comes with Satisfactory, when you paint it black, you don't get black, you get gray. It is what it is. Use the actual fix-it wall pieces here, we could go with a black, but I don't think I want to do that. So I think just 2 of those is enough to add some visual interest here. Okay, so I've just thrown on some basic finishing touches here. I've got some pillars on top here that are just big metal pillars on top of big pillar supports, small pillar supports on top of that, and these bollards from Structural Solutions, along with just our little square signs, 1 meter ones. I think that gussies it up pretty nicely. I've also gone ahead and added some basic walls here in just steel, which will run all the way down, and we're going to use that to cover up our main bus line here on the front. At least for now, I think that's what we're going to do. And with just a little bit of cleanup there, I think this is about done. I think I really like the look of this. Now, it's going to look much better once we get a whole row of these in place. The one thing I have been thinking about, though, is these are probably going to grow vertically. So I've kind of built these roofs so that we're going to have a tiered roof structure as we continue to go up. So the actual building doesn't start until right about here. So given that the front of this facade is not actually attached, we'll just do a repeating pattern of this same style all the way up with overhangs. Maybe we'll cut them back in underneath a little bit or something there. But we will just pull off these roof caps we've added here and just raise those up. We will literally raise the roof. So that's what we're going to do as we need to grow these vertically, but then we'll have a repeating visual style over and over again for each of these factories as we get them complete. Now, I'll probably do all of that building in between episodes because just watching me set up the same factory 12 times is probably not super exciting for you all. So stay tuned and I'll show you the finished build at a different point in the future. But for now, that about brings us to the end of this episode of Enterprise Architecture. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends!